U.S. Central Command carried out a heavy wave of strikes on Iran after a roughly 5 to 6 day pause. Joining us now to discuss is Rod Martin, geopolitical analyst and founder and CEO of Martin Capital. So Rod, good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. Now, President Trump gave diplomacy another chance with Iran. I guess we shouldn't be surprised, but why would Iran, just choose to throw that away and restart a fight that it cannot win?
Oh, Iran can't ever agree to a deal. It's just not going to happen short of a surrender. And Donald Trump understands that perfectly well. But you see what's beginning to coalesce. First of all, we struck these Iraq-based pro-Iran militias alongside the Saudis, which is just extraordinary. The Saudis have kept their noses out of this all along the way. And now they're actually doing joint missions with us on foreign soil to deal with Iran. We have had significant cooperation increases in it from Kuwait, from the UAE, from others. And what Donald Trump is doing here is not so much negotiating with people who really can't be negotiated with, as he is negotiating with all of Iran's neighbors who absolutely can. And we're seeing that. We saw it in the case of the 123 deal, which is about civilian nuclear power for Saudi Arabia, that the president expressly conditioned on peace with Israel, joining the Abraham Accords, becoming part of a regional peace. We see that in Syria, the Syrian leader is talking about coming to some kind of peace agreement with Israel. The Israelis just worked out this deal under Marco Rubio's help with the Lebanese government to get control of their country again and kick out Hezbollah. So all across the region, you have somewhat intransigent Arab governments that Iran is actually helping us negotiate with to accomplish a better post-war world. And the president needs to show that he's reasonable. He needs to show that he's willing to negotiate, because none of these guys in the region have a lot of stomach for just going at Iran full out. But they're getting there, and they're getting there every single time Iran attacks a hotel or a water plant or a sewage plant or some other civilian infrastructure in their countries, while they have not been fighting Iran. Well, they're all beginning to now.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if the actions by Saudi Arabia could mean that it's aligning more with the United States, but it seems like that's what's happening. The United States, as you pointed out, is making more friends, alliances, partnerships, whatever you want to call it, in that region. But it seems like Iran is getting help too, because this report, if true, according to Reuters, China could be supplying Iran with shoulder missiles. So what would be the significance of that? Would it put U.S. aircraft in danger?
It probably wouldn't be a meaningful threat such that the U.S. Air Force and naval aviation couldn't contend with it, but it's annoying and it's needlessly provocative. I do know probably what the Chinese are thinking, but rhetorically speaking, what the heck are they thinking? We've got a trade negotiation going on. We've got a bunch of irons in the fire with them, and they're stirring up trouble here. Again, kind of pinprick trouble. We're not talking about them shipping advanced stealth fighters to Iran. And it's really important for your viewers to understand that this has been true all along. The Chinese have talked a big game about their BRICS alliance and all of these different things, but China hasn't shown up with the goods. China has refused to give Iran, at any price, advanced modern fighters. That just hasn't happened. And when the Iranians have asked them for them, the Chinese have basically laughed at them. They literally told them, the Israelis will have those destroyed before we can deliver them. It's just, they're not helping. They're not going to send troops. They're not going to do the things that you would expect from an ally. And the important point about that is a lot of the people here who were going on and on and on about how, oh, Trump's getting us into World War III. No, he absolutely isn't. Partly because the Chinese can't project power at that scale into a region distant from their shores, and partly because they just don't want to. So my guess is what we're seeing with the MANPADS, which are the shoulder-fired missiles you're talking about, what we're probably seeing there is a response to the increasing buildup of arms in Japan, Japan's transfer of frigates to the Philippines, sale of frigates to Australia, and the U.S. arms deal in Taiwan. And they're probably seeking leverage going into that next summit to try to get Trump not to help Taiwan as much as he would like to. I think that's really all we're seeing.
Okay, so you mentioned that you may know what China is thinking with this move. I'm wondering if you could go a bit deeper into that thinking, because you mentioned China and the U.S. have deals, negotiations happening. So China must have weighed the pros and cons with this move. So what is China's stake in this war? Why do they do this? What are they thinking?
The biggest single thing is, as I said, Japan and Taiwan. I mean, they are not explicitly, not in their press statements, but they are clearly linking the one to the other. And, I don't blame them for that. We'd do it. No question there. And they're not sending Iran the things they really need to be successful in this fight. So what will probably happen from here is we will start closing off the land routes into Iran. You saw when hostilities recommenced, one of the first targets we hit was a key bridge that brings in supplies overland through Uzbekistan into Iran. That doesn't exist anymore. There are certainly land corridors in various places that can be shut by a determined U.S. Air Force. There's a third element of that, and it's really fascinating. Zelensky was just at the White House, same day that Netanyahu was, in fact, and had a great meeting. And one of the reasons it was a great meeting was because Zelensky just hit an arms shipment in the Caspian Sea coming from Russia to Iran. Now, of course, the Iranians deny that it was an arms shipment, and so do the Russians, but we know better. And the fact that Ukraine is actually being helpful in a kinetic way at this point definitely increases Zelensky's standing in Washington. So a lot of things interlinked here, but the bottom line remains that Iran can't stop anything we're doing. There's absolutely nothing that they can do to prevent us from airstrikes, from anything we choose. And so the real issue is, how long can this regime last in power before its power is diminished so much that the people could rise up and overthrow it? And I think we will see that. We probably won't see it next week, but it's coming.
Okay, so to your point that Iran cannot stop the U.S. from doing anything, I've been talking to a number of experts on the Iran war, and they say one of Iran's strategies is to inflict political pressure on the United States, on President Trump. So I want to ask you this. If that is the case, if Iran wants to inflict political pressure, certain media outlets that are reporting negatively or unfairly, let's say unfairly about this war, are they indirectly helping actually Iran in its strategy to inflict political pressure on Trump?
Well, of course they are. In the same way that same media did the same things in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and basically anywhere that any Republican president has engaged in my lifetime. Of course, they were doing it to Lyndon Johnson, and he wasn't a Republican. But the Democrats we have now hated Lyndon Johnson, so that doesn't really mean a lot. The media is always going to demonize these things. They're going to talk about the War Powers Act and the 60-day limit and all this different stuff. But when Obama went to war in Libya, he went on for 222 days and they didn't cry boo. And when Bill Clinton also exceeded his 60-day limit by a lot in Kosovo, they didn't care. They didn't see a problem with it. So yes, the media is very partisan. They do not think that politics stops at the water's edge. They'll do anything they can to undermine this administration. And that's a terrible mistake, because Republican and Democrat administrations alike have understood, even if some of their approaches to dealing with it were dumb, like Obama's, nevertheless, they have all agreed that Iran is a danger to the world. It's a danger to us. It has to be dealt with. And only Donald Trump has had the courage to really do it.
Yeah, you would think that this would be a bipartisan issue and the media would treat it as such, a bipartisan issue, and not take sides. But before you go here, Rod, I just have one final thing, and it's not related to the Iran war. It's related to Dr. Fauci and his testimony yesterday. I'll just get a quick comment from you on that before we leave here. It wasn't very much of a testimony because he pleaded the Fifth Amendment over 100 times. He didn't even answer basic questions. At one point, a senator was asking him the color of his tie, and he pleaded the Fifth. So any comments you have on that, finally?
Tony Fauci has a real problem. I mean, first and foremost, he has a presidential pardon, which means that he must testify. He cannot invoke the Fifth Amendment. And if he does, then he's guilty of obstruction of congressional investigation. Well, that's a crime, and it's not covered by the pardon, because the pardon is retrospective, not prospective. It doesn't apply to new crimes. So on the one hand, he's in real danger there, and Rand Paul has made clear he means to see him prosecuted. Second, if he does testify, if he cures that problem by coming back and saying, oh, mea culpa, I'm sorry, let me tell you what I have to say, well, then he's got a completely different set of problems, one of which is if he doesn't speak completely truthfully, he flirts with perjury, which we've seen him do in congressional testimony before. And the record is now really, really clear. So it's a good thing he got that pardon. That's before we even enter into an examination of whether the pardon was valid. Let's just assume it is. If he shows up and he testifies, now he's in danger of perjury again, or in the alternative, shredding his own reputation, which the diaries have pretty much already done, and fingering a bunch of his lieutenants. And, one of those is under indictment already for these very things. That's before we get to state level prosecutions or civil suits by attorneys general. Florida's all over that. Texas is all over that. They probably won't be the last. So I imagine that his lawyers told him, you actually can't avoid testifying by pleading the Fifth because you've got a pardon, but it may be your best bad option under the circumstances, and we'll just see where it goes. I don't think it's going to go anywhere good for Tony Fauci.
You think states could actually prosecute him?
Very possibly. Now, you have to have a good state law cause of action, and we have some very creative attorneys general, particularly in Florida and Texas, and if they can find a way to do it, they're to, but they might very well have a civil case. And the civil case would be very similar to a civil rights case. Normally, you can't sue the government. We have this thing called sovereign immunity. We inherited it from the British, and you can't sue the king. So normally that's the rule, and that's enshrined in the 11th Amendment. However, there are cases where you can, if the court should find that the person was acting illegally and was only able to do so by virtue of his public office. So he is acting under vires, under color of state law. That could be an avenue for these state attorneys general to go after Fauci. And if they can find a way to do it, they absolutely will.
Okay, well, Rod, let's leave it there for today. Always enjoy your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.